Insurgent sometimes raises its huge head, a monstrous mystery lurking in life's deeps, the mystery of dark and fallen worlds, the dread visages of the adversary kings.
Yes, so here we have this word insurgent that
Yeah.
seems to us to be a noun,
Hmm. But it's
but
an adjective.
it's an adjective, yes. And so it's something that's rebellious or in
Hmm.
revolt. And it is a monstrous mystery lurking in life's deep. It's also the mystery of dark and fallen worlds and the dread visages of the adversary kings. These adversary kings, Mother speaks about, and she calls them the four asuras.
Hmm.
And she says two have already been converted.
Hmm.
And, the other two, the Lord of Death and the Lord of Falsehood, she said, made an attempt at conversion.
Hmm.
But they've been intimately associated with my life, she says.
Hmm. Hmm.
When the Lord of Death disappeared and lost his physical body, she says, I don't know what has become of him. The Lord of Falsehood, the one who now rules over this earth.
Hmm.
He tried hard to be converted, but he found it disgusting. Oh my God. At times he calls himself the Lord of Nations. It is he who sets all wars in motion, and only by thwarting his plans could the last war be won. This one does not want to be converted, not at all. He wants neither transformation nor the supramental world, for that would spell his end. It's so important to us today to see that he's so hard at work
Hmm. Yes.
for these people. Yeah. So we'll continue then.
The dreadful powers held down within his depths become his masters or his ministers. Enormous, they invade his bodily house, can act in his acts, infest his thought and life. It's like Shraddhaluda's talk yesterday.
Yes, yes, very true. So we don't have to say more that they can do this.
Yes.
We hold them down, of course, but sometimes they can just overtake the mind.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. Now we have another word, inferno, just like that first word, insurgent.
Inferno surges into the human air and touches all with her perverting breath. Inferno is what is Inferno? Is it hell? The
It
under
is basically hell. It's
or like the
yeah,
vital world?
the infernal regions. It's suggestive of hell. It's fiendish. It's diabolical. I would use it more as fiendish and diabolical,
Hmm.
even though the capital is because it's the first word of the line. So insurgent here, something of the infernal regions, surges into the human air. So from those depths of hell, it surges into the human air. And therefore it touches everything with a perverting breath. Very powerful.
Grey forces like a thin miasma creep, stealing through chinks in his closed mansion's doors, discoloring the walls of upper mind in which he lives his fair and spacious life, and leave behind a stench of sin and death. not only rise in him perverse drifts of thought and formidable formless influences, but there come presences and awful shapes, tremendous forms and faces mount dim steps and stare at times into his living rooms, or called up for a moment's passionate work, lay a dire custom's claim upon his heart. Aroused from sleep, they can be bound no more.
It's really scary, isn't it?
Hmm.
It's frightening.
What is miasma? Like a thin miasma?
Miasma noxious vapor.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have these gray forces. We also have this inferno that touches everything with this perverting breath. We have the gray forces. And what do? Like a noxious vapor, they steal through chinks. Chinks are really cracks or fissures in his closed mansion's door, in our body, in our physical body or our mind or vital. Mainly, I would say the vital. Discoloring the walls of upper mind, that's very true. It discolors those walls in which he lives very, what shall I say, almost his fair and specious life, plausible but false, and leave behind a stench of sin and death. But then Sri Aurobindo gives us a colon because he's not finished telling us about this. Not only rise in him perverse drifts of thought and formidable, formless influences. You said formidable.
Is
And
it formid?
I don't know. Can we take can we take a minute?
Yes.
Okay, because that's an important one. Oh, okay. Formidable. Formidable. Formidable.
Formidable.
So that is correct. How did you get these British pronunciations?
Um, in India, we're taught British English,
Okay. So that's
so that's how I think.
in college. In college, yeah. Formidable.
Yes.
Formidable. Good. Okay. So formidable, formless influences, but there come presences and awful shapes. This is something that, not to be talked about to others, but this fellow Ritam, this Russian guy, you might get him.
What's his name again?
Ritam, Ritam.
No, I have not.
His I forget his Russian name, but he was standing on a bridge, and this being comes to him and says, "Jump off, and you'll be fine. You'll be protected." And he broke his leg. He jumped off, and that is the presence and that awful shape that comes, and these tremendous forms, and actually they did that to him, and many times Alok has worked with him, and I've worked with him also, and yet these tremendous forms and faces that mount these dim steps in the being and stare at times into his living rooms, or called up for a moment's passionate work, lay a dire customs claim upon his heart. When the customs lay a claim upon you, you can't get out of it. Aroused from sleep, they can be bound no more. Please continue.
Afflicting the daylight and alarming night, invading at will his outer tenement, the stark gloom's grisly dire inhabitants, mounting into God's light, all light perturb.
Now, isn't that interesting, though? That they perturb all light. Very interesting statement
I,
from Sri Aurobindo.
I didn't understand these lines actually.
Well, they afflict the daylight, and they alarm night, and they invade at will this human body, our outer tenement, and the stark gloom's grisly is something that's horrible, gruesome, formidable, grim. The stark gloom's grisly, dire inhabitants, mounting into God's light, all light perturb. They don't destroy that light, they don't disfigure that light, but they do perturb it.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
I see.
So, yeah, let's carry on. Unless you have a,
All no,
yeah,
I
okay.
yes. All they have touched or seen they make their own. In nature's basement lodge, mind's passages fill, disrupt thoughts' links and musing sequences, break through the soul's stillness with a noise and cry, or they call the inhabitants of the abyss, invite the instincts to forbidden joys,
Invite, huh?
invite the instincts to forbidden joys. A laughter wake of dread, demoniac mirth, and with nether riot and revel shake life's floor.
I've always understood as demoniac.
Demoniac mirth.
I think that's more correct, demoniac.
Did I say demoniac? Yes, okay,
Right,
yes.
the
Yeah,
demoniac, yes.
yes.
So everything they touch or see, they make their own. And this is a good example of people who have gone crazy.
Mm,
They have been taken over by these beings. All they have touched or seen, they make their own. They lodge in nature's basement. They fill the passages of the mind. They disrupt the links of thought and musing sequences. They break through the soul's stillness with a noise and cry. For they call the inhabitants of the abyss, and they invite the instincts to forbidden joys, the laughter wake of dread demoniac mirth, and with nether riot and revel shake life's floor. There couldn't be anything better said than our condition on the earth right now.
mm,
They're
yes.
doing that. They're creating the wars. They're creating the nether riots, and they're shaking this floor of our life. The whole substance of the earth is being shaken. So they even call the inhabitants of the abyss, and even invite the instincts to forbidden joys. And these joys are horrible, horrible joys, not the small joys that we know of that are a little negative, but really, really powerful. And I've seen it in one boy. Interesting experience. Where was I in Gujarat, and I could see him shaking. And I went over and I held him and I invoked Mother, and suddenly he starts weeping in my arms, and the being was gone.
Oh,
But, but it came back, of course, again. But he's a little better now. And one day he brought his young daughter, I think she was 12 years old or so, to talk with me.
mm,
And I felt that he was getting better.
mm,
So impotent to quell his terrible prisoners, the householder is appalled and sits above because his house is taken from him and it's not no longer his house. Did we get all of that? I think, yeah, we
No, we
sort of
were, yeah,
demoniac worm mirth. Yeah, we did all of that. Okay.
yeah.
So he is bound.
He is bound and forced, a victim of the play, or a lord, joys in the mad and mighty din. His nature, I,
Well,
the two lines, he is bound and forced. So
yes,
he's either a victim of the play or he's a willing participant.
exactly. And it's a mad and mighty din, he says. Huh?
Hmm. His nature's dangerous forces have arisen and hold at will a rebel's holiday.
And it's only when man really allows these dangerous forces to rise in him, then they can hold this rebel holiday at will. And Sri Aurobindo is continuing on and on again. Carry on.
Aroused from the darkness where they crouched in the depths, prisoned from the sight, they can be held no more. His nature's impulses are now his lords.
And this is why in Savitri he says about the divine name. If we can keep pronouncing the divine name, they can't get through. It's when we give up that call to the mother that they have a rebel's holiday. So they've crouched in the depths and they've aroused from the darkness, and they can't be held anymore. They're invisible to the sight, and his nature's impulses are now his lords. So these impulses of nature, which are not always good, they become his lords. They rule him. So we'll go on a little bit more and then you can read the whole thing. So,
Once quelled, or wearing spacious names and vests, infernal elements, demon powers are there.
yeah, so they can be quelled and they are mostly quelled by humanity, but they can also wear specious names and vests. Now, I think I've told you the story of Nalini going at night to the Samadhi.
No.
Okay, I've just written it because it's not on our site anywhere, and I've looked all over for it and couldn't find it, and it's extremely important. So every night before sleep, he would go to do his pranams to Sri Aurobindo.
This is, who is this?
Nolini.
Nolini, yes.
So one night he goes and he gets near to the Samadhi, and there is Sri Aurobindo,
Ah, yes.
brilliant gold and most beautiful being he's ever seen.
Yes.
And he says he was going to bow to him, and he found that the feet were cloven.
Hmm.
He said, had I done that, I would have been lost forever. Incredible thing.
Yes, you have told me that.
Yeah. So we see these demon powers are there in this world. They're in these people like Soros and Gates, I believe, and a number of others. And they are working in these people because everyone is uh, controlled by them at times. It's not the person himself. It's the being that's using that person for a particular thing. So these demon powers are there, and still Sri Aurobindo is going on.
Man's lower nature hides these awful guests. Their vast contagion grips sometimes man's world.
And look at that. Exactly, exactly our time. The vast contagion of these beings using those people grips sometimes man's world.
And
Wow. Let's do the last six lines and then you can read them. And awful.
an awful insurgence overpowers man's soul.
Clear. Huh?
In house and house the huge uprising grows. Hell's companies are loosed to do their work. Into the earthways they break out from all doors, invade with bloodlust and the will to slay, and fill with horror and carnage God's fair world. Death and his hunters stalk a victim earth. A terrible angel smites
Well,
at every
let's.
door.
I think we should stop at God's fair world. That would be
Yes,
okay
yes,
because you have a lot to read.
yes. Okay,
Okay.
let's begin. Insurgent sometimes raises its huge head, a monstrous mystery lurking in life's deeps, the mystery of dark and fallen worlds, the dread visages of the adversary kings. The dreadful powers held down within his depths become his masters or his ministers. Enormous, they invade his bodily house, can act in his acts, infest his thought and life. Inferno surges into the human air and touches all with a perverting breath. Grey forces like a thin miasma creep, stealing through chinks in his closed mansion's doors, discoloring the walls of upper mind in which he lives his fair and spacious life, and leave behind a stench of sin and death. Not only in him perverse, not only rise in him perverse drifts of thought and formidable formless influences, but there come presences and awful shapes, tremendous forms and faces mount dim steps and stare at times into his living rooms, or called up for a moment's passionate work, lay a dire custom's claim upon his heart. Aroused from sleep, they can be bound no more, afflicting the daylight and alarming night, invading at will his outer tenement. The stark gloom's grisly dire inhabitants, mounting into God's light, all light perturb. All they have touched or seen they make their own. In nature's basement lodge, mind's passages fill, disrupt thought's links and musing sequences, break through the soul's stillness with a noise and cry, or they call the inhabitants of the abyss, invite the instincts to forbidden joys, a laughter wake of dread, demon, dem, dem, demoniac,
No,
demon,
demoniac.
demon,
Demoniac.
demoniac mirth, and with nether riot and revel shake life's floor, impotent to quell his terrible prisoners. Appalled, the householder helpless sits above. Taken from him, his house is his no more. He is bound and forced, a victim of the play, or a lord, joys in the mad and mighty din. His nature's dangerous forces have arisen and hold at will a rebel's holiday. Aroused from the darkness where they crouched in their depths, prisoned from the sight, they can be held no more. His nature's impulses are now his lords. Once quelled or wearing specious names and vests, if infernal elements, demon powers are there. Man's lower nature hides these awful guests. Their vast contagion grips sometimes man's world. An awful insurgence overpowers man's soul. In house and house, the huge uprising grows. Hell's companies are loose to do their work. Into the earthways they break out from all doors, invade with bloodlust and the will to slay, and fill with horror and carnage God's fair world.
Well, it's a very strong passage in this book seven,
Yes,
but with the canto of the parable of the search for the soul. And Sri Aurobindo wants us to understand this in our search for our own souls, that these things can happen, and we have to be very careful and always alert. And I fall many times. I've fallen. You got to pick yourself up each time. There's no other way for us.
yeah, yeah,
We don't have we don't have any way of escape. But
yeah.
it's a very very powerful section, and you read it quite well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjana.
Yes,
Namaste.
namaste. Thank you.